I want to welcome Allison Walsh. Allison Walsh is a seasoned executive, philanthropist, speaker, professional coach, and consultant, and Miss Florida in 2006. A two-time CEO for national coaching firms and a certified positive psychology coach. Allison has over 15 years of organizational leadership, mentorship, and coaching experience, and has shared her story with over 100,000 live audience members. She serves as Vice President of Business Development and Branding for Advanced Recovery Systems, a national provider and industry leader in behavioral health care. In addition to managing their national business development team since its inception in 2013, she's been instrumental in the development of their mental wellness app, Nobu. As host of the She Believed She Could and Dear Mind, You Matter podcasts, and the creator of impactful coaching programs, Allison focuses on helping women develop confidence and leverage their personal brands, personally and professionally, to scale their businesses, careers, and influence while making an impact. So, Allison, there's a lot there that kind of sparks sort of the main themes you introduce your book with. And one that I was really curious about is how you came to speaking, how you came to that, 100,000 live audience members, and sort of developing the confidence there. I know that you dealt with your own eating disorder much earlier when you were about 18 years old. You were coming out of recovery, if I'm correct. So can you talk to me about kind of what that transition looked like for you? I think a lot of people who come out of some kind of recovery or really difficult phase of life kind of just want to move on. They might want to, understandably put some of the darker struggles behind them. What made you want to share your experiences with other people and kind of step in the limelight, so to speak?
Well, thank you for that question. And it's so good to be here with everybody. For me, I was a passionate advocate right out of the gate. Once I realized that recovery was possible and that there were so many other people that were struggling or had struggled just like I did, I wanted to make sure that no one ever felt like they had to walk alone and that they were misunderstood or not understood or didn't have support or access to resources. And I think because I suffered in silence for so many years, I found my voice again when I found recovery, and it was my outlet. It also helped me stay very accountable to myself and to everybody involved in my recovery by me sharing my story responsibly, because I knew that I couldn't be out there doing it if I wasn't doing everything I possibly could to take care of myself in the process, because I wanted to be, an example of what was possible by taking those brave, bold steps to heal and to feel better, and to take care of myself. And so that's where it started. It was such an innocent entry point into speaking. There was a mentor in my life, and I talk about this in chapter 1 of the book, where she looked at me and said, "You've been blessed with a voice to tell your story, and you can really make a difference in other people's lives if you want to do this." And so I'll never forget, she set up a presentation after we worked through telling my story and doing so the right way. She set up a presentation at a local high school for me to share. And there was something that was lit within me at that moment that I knew that I needed to do more of that. Fast forward, I went to the University of Florida. I walked on campus way back then, 20 plus years ago, and realized that there was nobody that was really talking about it. And yet eating disorders run rampant on college campuses. And so I was like, well, I can do something about it. So it was just like that next step. I started sharing my story on campus. And then I was blessed, as you mentioned in my interview or in the intro, to have the chance to be Miss Florida. It was my, topic of choice during my entire year of service. So I traveled all across the country, sharing my story of recovery, of hope, of healing, right? Of being able to overcome hard things that could at one point feel like they could take you down completely. And that's really where it grew organically from there. But it all started with me learning how to tell my story and to share that message of hope with others.
That's wonderful. I don't want to jump ahead, but I do think this is a good time to point out that you have these 6 pillars in your book, She Believed She Could. And they're based on positive psychology. I'm curious, how these steps can work with someone potentially who maybe has gone through something similar that you went through with eating disorder recovery or another issue. Just the fact that, a lot of people kind of trying to arrive in a place of health, for example, might not have a linear journey. How do those 6 pillars, and we can say what they are as well, how can they sort of help somebody on that difficult path towards the person they're trying to become?
I love talking about the world of positive psychology, because you're right. Like, recovery is not linear. You are going to have struggles of other circumstances and situations, right? Like, life isn't perfect. And so I found the world of positive psychology actually many, many years later. But there are so many principles and things that are so useful. So I actually found it as a result of a burnout journey that I had been on. And I was looking for a way for me to be able to reframe and to find resources and tools that could not only help me, but help my team. And I was leading a large organization at the time. And I was noticing, we're coming out of COVID. There were so many hard things that we all went through. And I realized we needed to be reinvigorated, and found this world of positive psychology, right? The world of the science of happiness, well-being, and success. And I really resonated with the pillars, especially because one of them, and I'll touch on this in a second, is so deeply connected to my why, right? And doing things that matter and that have purpose and meaning, right? So just to back up, the 6 pillars in positive psychology, there's a word they call PERMA, right? So it's the 6 letters. It's positive emotions is the P. Engagement, which I love. And I do a lot of work in this area because it's really focused on strengths-based coaching and your neurological strengths, and aligning what you do with who you are naturally and intrinsically. Then there's the relationships pillar, which is so important, not just relationships with others, but relationship with self, which I think ties into this conversation so beautifully. Then the M is for meaning, right? So again, doing work that's meaningful, which is why I've spent 20 years in the behavioral healthcare industry building organizations, but also working with so many passionate individuals and helping them build their brands and speak their message and share with the world what they care about. Then A is accomplishment and achievement, right? So really, so many things come down to goals, right? I think I had a lot of goals in my own recovery, right? Like, let's take these meaningful steps and have these milestones. So again, ties back to everything that we're talking about. And then H was added later after positive psychology really kicked off, and it's health, right? And so important, not just the sleep and the nutrition and exercise, but also restoration, and giving ourselves those intentional pauses throughout the day that allow us to reset, reinvigorate, instead of just grinding through, which can naturally be sometimes the default for many people, myself included. So it really helped to give me a new framework and pillars in which I could lead my life by and live my life by, and also share with others to help them have the tools that they need in their toolbox, regardless of where they are and what stage or phase of life that they're in. So I find it to be incredibly helpful just from an overall well-being purpose, but it's also helped me unlock greater levels of fulfillment and joy in the work that I do, because I keep coming back around to them.
Yeah, and I think going back to that work journey, you start your own nonprofit, Hope, helping other people eat. And then you run that for about 18 years.
18 years.
Wow. And then you went from that into working in the treatment industry, which sounds like a kind of big shift. Can you talk about that transition between the nonprofit world? You're talking about eating disorder recovery in both spaces, but you kind of move into marketing and this kind of more, I guess you're building a brand image around the treatment industry versus maybe advocating more directly on the nonprofit side. What was that transition like? And did that challenge you in particular ways, or make it difficult to kind of, live by those pillars or find that purpose?
Yeah. No, I mean, great question again. So I think that for me, I actually had some crossover and parallel paths. So I started the nonprofit when I was 18. I was just so dedicated to creating that narrative and resources and advocacy and support and just building community, right? And making sure that people had access to resources and care. So like, that's the through line through all of it, right? Is like, I really love being able to connect people with what they need to be able to take care of themselves. And so, I went to college, as I mentioned, at UF. I initially thought I was going to be an attorney. There was a woman on the West Coast of the United States. Her name is Lisa Cantor. She is like a renowned attorney for helping individuals that have been denied coverage for their treatment. And I was so inspired by her. And so I wanted to be the Lisa Cantor of the East Coast. That was like my mission. So I went to law school. I got to law school. I was like, this is actually the worst idea I've ever had. But I'm a very stubborn human. And I was like, nope, I just got to finish. Right. So I'm going through the process and I'm finishing up school. And I was at Anita Walk that was in Tampa. And a woman came up to me that had actually booked me to speak when I was Miss Florida. And she said, Allison, we are starting an eating disorder program at the University of Florida in Shands. And we're also doing this like joint venture program with Orlando Health in the addiction space. Would you have anybody in mind, maybe on your board of directors, that would be interested in being a part of this business development and marketing side of it? And here I am, a new mom at this point, realizing I'm not going to actually practice law after just having spent 3 years in it, but wanting to do more in the treatment space. And I was like, I do. So I had to have a really hard conversation with everybody in my world and let them down that I was not going to be an attorney. But I found myself going in that direction and falling in love with the business side of healthcare and being able to create, again, greater access. About a year later, I was tapped to get involved with a startup organization. And at the time, I'm sure everybody thought I was totally crazy for doing so, but I took a leap of faith and I was the second person brought in to Advanced Recovery Systems to start a treatment program in essentially my backyard. There were no private residential treatment programs in the Central Florida community at the time. And the physician that was heading up the eating disorder program at UF that I just had so much admiration and respect for was going to be the medical director. And I came with him and helped start that program. I was there for 9.5 years. Absolutely loved it. Grew it to 1,000 team members across the country, multi-site, multi-state, again, just continuing to help people. And that's really where I was able to learn so much about not only business and being able to create treatment programs that make a very big difference in the lives of those that we serve. But it's also where I learned so many valuable lessons when it came to leadership and taking care of your people and making sure that, you are creating an environment in which they feel like they can thrive. And that's where I felt that transition really happened. And I've since had the chance to, get involved with another startup organization, telehealth, to be able to enhance access to adolescent and young adults that are in need of mental health resources. But again, it's the desire to help connect, right? And it's also the desire to help optimize people that are a part of the organization as well. Because I feel like they are all very mission driven, right? Anybody that works in this space cares deeply about helping others. And I love being able to support their growth and development in the process.
That's an important point because I think in healthcare, oftentimes there's such a focus on the patient or the client, and then the people actually providing the care can get lost in that shuffle, or there's no development or support. Can you talk about how, in your book, you're really focusing on how we can advocate for ourselves, right, in these spaces and make that space? When you went through your own burnout, you had to kind of figure out, how do I ask for help? How do I support myself? Could you talk a little bit more about what steps you took, both when you were working with, employees at Advanced Recovery Systems, but also when you were going through your own burnout? Yeah. How do you address these kind of deeper issues of, I think the catch-all right now is kind of self-care, but it goes a little bit deeper than that, of basically just, collective care in these healthcare spaces.
Yeah. Well, and I think healthcare workers, especially in the mental health space over the last several years, I consider everybody an earth angel. This work is meaningful and it's hard. And I can't say thank you enough to everybody that's providing the care, but for everybody involved in the ecosystem itself, right? And just in general, regardless of what industry you're in, I always say, like, do a checkup from the neck up, constantly evaluate, like, where are you? How are you feeling? Don't wait until you are at your absolute end. And I think for me, it was another awakening, right? Like, just I had been pushing so hard. I was so focused on making sure that the business was still in a good place, that my team was still in a good place, that my kids and my family were okay. And I was slowly deteriorating, right? I wasn't doing the things that I was once doing. And even as simple as my morning routine was compromised, right? I was no longer listening to my podcast that I love that like enrich my mind on my way to work. I was no longer giving myself enough time in the morning to just move my body and like connect and like journal and do all of that stuff. Everything was just blurred and mush, right? And I didn't realize that over, the first 6, 8, 9 months of the pandemic. But by the time it was, that first year was over and we're all looking for the light at the end of the tunnel that we couldn't find still. And I didn't feel like myself anymore, right? Like I was stressed out. I was seeing all the physical signs and symptoms, but it wasn't something that was just like, bam, right in front of me. And I think that's where I really recognized how important it was for me to put things in place and to create those boundaries so that I could put my oxygen mask on first, or I always say put my crown on first, right? But I needed to do the things that I needed to do for myself in order for me to, at that point, get myself back on track, but have the stability in my life to be able to show up fully as myself and to be the best I could be in the moment. And because I had just been depriving myself of all of those things that I once was doing, it was no wonder that I was depleted. It was no wonder that I was experiencing the things that I was. And you layer on all of the additional stress of leading, a huge team through a pandemic. And I always I'm an empath at heart, right? I tend to carry people's emotions with me. And that was hard. And I had to learn again how to do things a little bit differently. And that's where like the world of positive psychology really helped me so much. And all of the coaches and the trainers and therapists that were pouring into me, helping me to get back to where I wanted to be, were so beneficial. But I think it's so critically important to check in with ourselves and to listen to our bodies. The natural tendency when something medically happens, we're real fast to call the doctor or get to urgent care or tell a doc or whatever. But our mental wellness contributes and impacts so many other aspects of our lives. And I really want to empower everybody that's listening or watching today to say, I need to be as proactive with my mental health as I am with my physical health. Because if we would do that, if everybody would do that, we would be in a much better place. And it's totally okay to ask for help. And I think that's one of the good things that came out of the pandemic is that mental health became much more a part of the narrative and the dialogue than it was before. And I want to encourage everybody to keep having those conversations and keep checking in with themselves and keep saying, you know what, I need a day, or I need to do this for myself, or creating the boundaries that they need to be able to take care of themselves on a regular basis.
Mm. I'm interested in this idea, and this relates to kind of, putting your mental health first, but this idea of cultivating belief that kind of runs through your book is like, how do I continue to sort of give myself this positive message that despite the obstacles, despite, the goals I have in mind seeming very out of reach, I can get there. And I wanted you to kind of talk more about your experience becoming Miss Florida. And sort of, I think that's a very kind of, in some ways, maybe not relatable to a lot of people, but in other ways, when you actually hear what you went through, there are a lot of experiences here that kind of zoom out to, everyday life and, competition, unexpected illness, deadlines, how to present yourself to other people with confidence, even when you don't feel that within. So yeah, what were some of the biggest lessons and, without giving everything in the book away.
Yeah, you teed me up with a big one here. So
yeah.
the TLDR here is that it was a very eventful competition. And, it was something that I worked really hard towards. The underlying message really in that chapter is about mindset and just continuing to commit to the goals that you have for yourself and doing the next step and staying focused on what you're there to do. And I competed for 4 years. So, take the sparkly crown dresses out of it. Like if there's ever a goal that anybody's, been working towards and you try and you fail, or you try and you don't get exactly what you think you're going to achieve, and you keep coming back and keep coming back for it, your investment, right, in yourself can be tested, and your belief in yourself can be tested. Or you can reframe it to think of it as I'm more experienced than I was the first time that I tried. And so it did take me several times to actually be able to pull it off. And there were so many things that happened leading up to that really special day, which also happened to be my 23rd birthday that I won. But, I had to I called off an engagement right before that. There were a ton of us that got food poisoning during the competition week. Like everything got shifted upside down. And if ever there was an opportunity, it was such a fork in the road moment where it was like, I can either pack my bags and go home and just quit on this dream, or I can put my blinders on and keep going forward. And I kept going forward, and it ended up working out for me. But I've thought about that on so many different occasions and shared that story with so many people, because we will be tested, right? And it's in those moments where we're tested and we persevere and we keep going and we keep trusting ourselves enough to take the next step, not necessarily know everything that we need to know or do all the things all at one time, but to just keep putting one foot in front of the next and focusing on what the bigger picture is, versus getting stuck in all of the things that aren't going well, or that are hard, or that were unexpected. And that's really what that chapter talks about, is that perseverance. And there was those moments in my recovery journey, right, where it was really hard. It was really, really icky. And there were days that were miserable, but I kept going. And I looked at every day as another opportunity to take care of myself and to do what I knew I needed to do, and one day at a time. Right. And so whether it's that people are struggling with, or they're working through on their own, or maybe there's a big goal or dream that you're chasing right now that means the world to you, and it feels like everything is kind of crashing down around you, it's going to be okay. You've survived 100% of your bad days already. This is going to help you be stronger. And I think the overarching message, right, again, like the book title, If She Believes She Could, you might not believe fully that you can get the big thing accomplished, but if you believe enough in your ability to take that next step and keep moving forward, eventually all of that will compound, and you'll be so proud of yourself for continuing to see it through.
So I'm really interested in this idea too. You speak in the book of when you were younger, you were living in Miami, I believe, and you're saying you were not around the best crowd.
Yeah.
And the importance of kind of surrounding yourself with people who kind of their values align with yours. They don't have to be the same as you. You can have differences, but ultimately they're going to be supportive of the place you're trying to get to. Do you have suggestions for people of how to cultivate that? I know, especially in a kind of quote unquote post-pandemic world, it's hard for people to reach out sometimes, or cultivate community. So what kind of are lessons that you learn from shifting things for yourself?
The most important lesson I learned was giving myself permission to evolve. I love the quote from Oprah of the whole point of being alive is to evolve into the complete person you were intended to be. And I noticed that my goals and dreams were evolving, and the things that I wanted were different than what I had initially thought they would be. And sometimes when you evolve, if your peer group or those that you're around, if they're not evolving, or they don't understand why you're chasing the dreams and goals that you have, it can get weird. It can get awkward. It can be unsupportive environment. And sometimes it's just because they don't understand the passion or the vision that you have. It's not ill intended, but sometimes it is. And so it's really recognizing like who is in your sphere of influence, who are the people that you're spending the most time with. Is there alignment, right, with how they're showing up and what they're doing and what their values are versus yours? And if there's not, then you do have to be very intentional about finding community, about finding others that are in alignment, that can help you be your best self, that can help you rise up. And so, in that situation, I was engaged to my college sweetheart, and we were going in very, very different directions. And just even he was in the culinary industry, right? So late hours, out not, out late at night, just different crowd. And I was trying to get my life together, and I was chasing after other dreams. And, just even the friends group that we were around at the time just wasn't a positive influence. And I knew it. And I knew that the version of myself that I wanted to be would regret continuing to surround myself with some really bad influences. And so I started to make those shifts, and those were hard, but I also had to put myself intentionally in places where I had hope that there were other people that were like me, that were, very focused on what was next. And that was hard, right? Especially when I was living down there. I wasn't from Miami. I had just moved down there for him. So I was starting over, and I was trying to find my people, and I had to put myself out there and just find community. But I liken it to doing something similar on campus, right? Like when I was at UF, I had to find community there. When I first walked on campus and didn't resonate or couldn't find people that were like me, that were in recovery, like I had to intentionally seek that out, right? I walked into the student healthcare center. I asked for support. I asked to be connected to others. And sometimes it's just making the ask, and you're allowing yourself to be surrounded by other people that are like you, because there are billions of people on this planet. I guarantee you can find community if you raise your hand and you share a little bit and you ask for support and help. You might also inspire somebody else to do the same thing, and you never know what's going to happen from there. So, that's really what that is intended to talk about is don't be afraid to evolve. Don't keep yourself stuck in a past version of yourself where maybe you don't belong anymore, but intentionally seek out those relationships. And back to those pillars of positive psychology, relationships is one of those, because there's so many, studies and things that have been done around the quality of your life is impacted by the quality of the relationships that you have. And so finding other people that have like-minded vision and values will make a big difference in how you show up every day.
Yeah, that's a great message. And I think one that also, I was thinking about how with Charlie Health, you're working with adolescents who are in treatment for eating disorders. That I think there's an interesting conversation to be had about how then to influence the younger people around you, and maybe parents or healthcare workers who are working with younger people and who are often, adolescents are in these environments where things can be very volatile and dramatic. It's a difficult time of life, difficult to control who you surround yourself with sometimes. And so I wonder if you have any advice for, building those kinds of relationships. I know you have your own kids as well. How do you kind of translate some of these messages to a younger generation that maybe they don't know what they want to do in a few years or even next week, but they have hopes and dreams that are a little bit further off, and they're trying to figure out their footing, who they want to be in the world?
Well, I do.
Do those pillars apply to them as well?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. I talk about this with my kids all the time, right? And the choices that you make and the impact that it can have many years later, right? Like, especially in a world that we live in today where everything's on social media and like your business is everybody's business. Like it can be hard, right? You have to be that much more thoughtful about the environments and the situations and the social circles and all of that, because you just never know. So, I talk about it all the time with my kids. I have one of the reasons that I was so intrigued with Charlie Health and the amazing work that they're doing in the mental health space was, we talked about it. I got involved when I was 18 years old because I was a passionate advocate because of my own struggle, right? As a, an adolescent. And I spent 20 years plus in the behavioral health space. And when the opportunity with Charlie Health presented itself, and I looked in the mirror, I thought, wow, like I'm a mom now to kids that are age eligible, should they ever need these types of support services, right? High acuity mental health. And I thought, what a beautiful way for my career to come full circle and to also be able to impact my children's generation, because I had watched just how challenging it was through the eyes of my kids going through a pandemic, right? Growing up, being removed from your situation, right? Like my oldest daughter went through a lot during that time, both, just changing schools and, she had some health challenges and things. And I watched this going, wow, like this is so important to continue to do this work and to be that much more vocal about mental health, as I am a mom and I've been involved in this industry and I see it every day and I know how important it is. But most importantly, for me, I need to show up for them and be able to have these conversations and talk about what they can do to take care of themselves, and to continue to reiterate just how important it is to be intentional about the choices that we make and the decisions we make, right? The people we surround ourselves with, the habits we create for ourselves, all of those things really, really matter. And will we struggle at different times? Absolutely. We are all human and no one is perfect. And asking for help is incredibly important. And it doesn't have to be when you're at your absolute end, right? It needs to be throughout, right? And so that's really been important for me to share with them. And then everything in the pause psych world, I talk to them all the time about the tools in their toolbox, right? Like the positive emotion side of it, right? And really doing things that they enjoy, that fulfill them, and surrounding themselves with good people that lift them up, that don't tear them down, and finding things that they're passionate about, not just doing the things that I think they should do, right? But like really finding things that matter to them, even though they're young, and giving them that, again, that mindset of like that ability to evolve. I think sometimes kids feel like very anxious in their adolescent years because they think they have to know what they want to do next and have it all figured out. And it's like, no, you can change. Like, if anything, like I'm a good example of it, right? Yeah, I spent a lot of time in behavioral health, but like went to law school, didn't do that, right? Like changed my mind a couple times on other businesses and ventures I was involved in, right? Like it's okay, right? You don't have to have it all figured out, but you need to show up. You need to be intentional about what your needs are and find opportunities to be able to do the things that you love and be around people that support you too. So.
It's a great message. And I think also, it definitely relates to your coaching business, right? And I wonder if people here are curious in general how coaching works. I started doing some coaching earlier this year, and after being introduced by a friend. Can you talk a little bit about what coaching is specifically and how it serves people, especially versus something maybe like therapy that people are more familiar with?
Yeah, I mean, I love the coaching world. I feel very fortunate that I've always been able to kind of have people in my corner, right? Whether they were formal coaches or just people who were like coaches in my life that were helping me to just be my best. And, at least in the sphere in the world that I stay and play in, it's very forward thinking, right? I think of therapy, so much of my experience in therapy has been helping me to unpack and understand like why things are the way they are, why I've handled situations the way that I did, what had happened and how I could heal from that. Right. So I was very much looking backwards to help me be able to spring forwards and hopefully handle things better the next time, and be more resilient and have great coping skills and all of that. The coaching world for me is very much like, what's next, right? Like, how are we going to reach this next goal? And so with my clients, we've always been working towards something together, an end goal, right? Whether they're launching a business, whether they're launching their brand, whether they're reinventing themselves. I've spent a lot of time with women, especially recently over the last several years, really helping them take ownership of who they are and shine their spotlight for the first time. Maybe they're stepping out of their corporate space and they're doing something on their own, or they've got a passion project that they really care about and they want to give life to that and actually do something bigger with it. So we work a lot on that side of it, and everything always starts with mindset. right? Because I think there's always those mental blocks that get in our way of why hasn't it happened yet? It could be related to imposter syndrome. It could be related to fear. It could be related to, perfectionism or all of these other blocks that tend to come up. And if we can get through that and we can create a plan and we can take incremental steps and we've got a deadline in place, we're going to get it done. And so that's what I love doing with my clients. And it's been so fun to be able to run alongside them as they've taken on big projects. I've worked with 300 clients individually over the last decade. It has been a lot of fun to be able to do that and be in that capacity. And I love, just being able to help other people succeed. I find great joy and fulfillment in that. And I love putting people in positions to win and to be able to do things that they love and have always wanted to do.
That's wonderful. And on that note, I want to give people space to ask any questions. There's a little under 10 minutes left. So I have more questions as well I can ask, but if you have anything you want to ask Allison, you can either add it directly to the chat or to the Q&A section. There should be a little icon at the bottom of the screen on the right side where you can ask any questions. But yeah, I think I wanted to get a little bit back into your competing in Miss America. Mm-hmm. I'm curious about how you navigated that specifically in terms of your own past with an eating disorder. I know that those spaces, your image is really scrutinized. Mm-hmm. And in your book, you talk a lot about, power posing and how you present your body and your body positioning, I think is the phrase you use. So yeah, kind of looking at both of those things, the first part of the question about what was your experience like in the Miss America, universe and with body image and those kinds of issues, how did you navigate that? And how do you, help your clients in coaching find confidence in how they present themselves physically in the world?
Well, and, I think for me, I didn't compete until I was on the other side of my eating disorder, right? And so everybody in my world was very mindful of that. And like, is this a good decision? Could this be triggering for you? And I just kept coming back around to the fact that my eating disorder didn't stem from a desire to lose weight. My eating disorder was all about control, and I'd gone through some pretty traumatic stuff, and that was how it manifested itself, right? And so I was also very proud of the fact that I could be a resource for other women who were involved in that organization that were struggling, right? So like me being there and having a microphone to be able to share my story also showed other people that recovery is possible and that they don't need to live their lives in a way in which isn't necessarily the most healthy, right? So I did compete during the days where swimsuit was a part of the competition. It's no longer a part of the Miss America organization. And I love that for women because, I still cringe at the fact that, my coworkers could Google and find me in a swimsuit, right? Like I don't do that. I don't take pictures and post myself in bikinis or swimsuits or anything like that. Like I don't. And so it just still kind of irks me out a little bit, but, from the body image perspective, I was very aware that, and very proud of the fact that I was able to connect people that I was close to with other support resources to help them learn how to love their bodies, to not judge themselves purely based on their size and shape, to find value and worth in who they are internally versus allowing other people to judge them and place all of their value based on how they look externally. So again, just another chance to use my voice for good versus, continuing to perpetuate a stereotype that, I wanted to make sure people knew that you didn't have to struggle if you were, and there were resources for help and you could get support if you needed it, but also to celebrate the confidence that comes from being on stage no matter what, right? So kind of back to the client side, right? Or just, I coach a lot of women that are stepping on stages, that are sharing their message, are speaking in front of large groups. And there is a lot of work that has to be done on, again, the mindset and the confidence to be able to put yourself out there. the way in which I, have done that over the course of my career has continued to evolve. But ultimately, it comes back to, again, the way in which you carry yourself and the way in which you believe in your ability to execute on what it is that you're about to do. Back 20 plus years ago, it was the Miss America stuff for me, but it's been, continuing to share my voice, share my story, help others do the same. And it all comes back down to, the belief in myself to be able to do that, and how I show up is a big part of that.
Yeah. And I think for a final question, if there's no questions from any of the attendees, I'm also really interested in that question of authority. If there's someone who, say, I wanted to share my story, or, start figuring out, I have a story to tell, I have advice to give, and how do I share this with other people? Where does that authority come from? How do you kind of advise people to get started on that journey where they kind of have to assert themselves in many ways as an expert, finding that confidence, how to present themselves, how to attract other people to their services?
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to them? What's a good starting place?
Just start. I mean, I think sometimes we overthink it. In today's day and age, everybody has a platform that they can use, right? Whether it's social, whether you like to write, whether you like to speak. So find what brings you joy. And then, like we talked about, with like seeking out a community of people that you can serve. When you show up in the service of others, it's about them, not about you, and I think when you can switch it, that's always what I think about. When I show up online, when I show up in large groups, when I showed up today, I was thinking about every single person that was going to be here and what I could leave them with versus anything that I was going to say, right? And it's the same thing. So if you have a story, because we all do, that you want to share, I encourage you to just start sharing and find your tribe of people that resonate and that will be impacted positively because of your courage and confidence to connect and be relatable and show them what's possible, right? And I think that's such an important piece of this, is always thinking about who you're trying to serve and why you want to share in the first place. Make it all about the impact that you can make versus anything about yourself.
Well, I feel inspired. Thank you so much, Allison. It's been wonderful to speak with you. Is there anything else you want to share with anyone?
No, I encourage everybody that's here today to, find something that you care deeply about or that you've already been doing and kick it up a notch, right? I always say, like, shine brightly, like, don't be afraid to really show up fully. And like I just mentioned, when you show up to serve others and you can find alignment with what you care about and what you get to do on a daily basis, you're going to live a very fulfilled life. And being open to opportunities to continue to amplify your impact and to be of service, you'll have just the most incredible life and career. And just know that even if you are going through something that feels messy now, there's always hope. There's always light. There's always possibilities. And I do believe that hindsight is always 2020. If I would have, been able to talk to my 18-year-old self again and just say, you know what, I know it stinks right now what you're going through, but you're going to have the most beautiful life and career when you stay committed to your recovery and to taking care of yourself and helping others. That would have been something that I'm sure I would have loved to have heard back then. But I want to tell anybody now who potentially is feeling that way. But there's so many opportunities to do good in this world, and everything is possible if you are willing to try.
Thank you, Allison. And I have a message for everyone, which is that there is a giveaway of Allison's book, She Believed She Could. 3 people will be chosen and you'll receive an email letting you know. Otherwise, Steph put a link in the chat so that you can purchase the book if you're unfortunately not chosen as the winner of the giveaway. But please buy the book. I have a copy and I've been really enjoying it. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, everybody.